My name is Elena, and if you had met me 6 years ago, you'd have seen a woman full of ambition, drive, and dreams that reached far beyond the walls of a small apartment in Chicago. I was a marketing strategist at a well-known firm, leading campaigns for national brands, working long hours, but loving every second of it. I had goals, real ones. I wanted to start my own agency before I turned 35. I wanted to travel, to inspire other women like me to lead without apologizing. And then came Mark. He was charming in that classic, steady sort of way, calm voice, confident smile, the kind of man who made you feel safe. We met at a conference in Boston, talked for 6 hours straight, and never looked back. We got married after a year of dating. At first, he was endlessly supportive of my work. He said he admired my independence, my fire, the way I owned a room. But somewhere between our second anniversary and the day I told him I got promoted to creative director, things shifted. He came home late more often. He complained that I was too distracted, even though he had known from the beginning what my career meant to me. And the night I mentioned wanting to pitch my own agency idea to investors, he didn't celebrate. He frowned. "You know, maybe it's time to slow down," he said, sitting across from me with a glass of wine in his hand. "We've talked about kids. You're almost 33. Do you really want to keep chasing something so exhausting?" I didn't answer. Not right away. I just stared at the man I loved, wondering when the support turned into silent disapproval. A month later, I found myself staring at my laptop at 3 a.m., trying to finish a presentation, while Mark snored peacefully beside me. I was exhausted, not just from work, but from fighting to hold on to a version of myself that was slipping away. Then came the ultimatum. One Sunday morning, while folding laundry, Mark said, "I think it's time you made a choice, family or career, because I'm not sure I can be with someone who's never home, who's always tired, and who's clearly prioritizing clients over her husband." It felt like someone had dumped a bucket of ice water on my head. I stood there, holding a towel in my hands, my heart racing. I didn't answer him, not because I agreed, but because I already knew the outcome. I quit my job 3 weeks later. 3 weeks after Mark's ultimatum, I handed in my resignation letter. I remember the silence in the elevator as I left my office for the last time. No farewell party, no heartfelt goodbyes. Just a few polite hugs and a "you'll be missed" from my assistant. They didn't understand why I was leaving, and I couldn't bring myself to explain. Back home, Mark was all smiles. "You won't regret this," he said, kissing my forehead. "Now we can finally start living." But it didn't feel like living. It felt like shrinking. At first, I tried to embrace the change. I filled my days with errands, cooking elaborate dinners, even took a pottery class just to have something to do. Mark seemed happier. He would come home to a clean house, hot meals, and a smiling wife. But I wasn't smiling inside. The silence during the day was deafening. My calendar, once filled with pitches and meetings, was now blank. I checked my emails obsessively, out of habit, only to find newsletters and spam. I missed the buzz, the purpose, the adrenaline of building something that was mine. One evening, while clearing the dinner plates, Mark casually said, "See? This is so much better. You're not stressed all the time, and I get to come home to someone who's actually present." I bit my tongue so hard I thought I'd taste blood. I wasn't present. I was disappearing. Things got worse when I brought up the idea of freelancing, just a few clients, remote work, something light. Mark shut it down immediately. "Why would you go back to that?" he asked. "You're finally happy." But I wasn't. And he knew it. I began to feel more like a maid than a partner. Mark no longer asked how my day was. He stopped listening, stopped noticing. Conversations became one-sided, his work, his goals, his stress. I became invisible. Then came the final blow. One Friday night, I was scrolling through his iPad, looking for a movie to stream, when a notification popped up, a text, from someone named Ashley Jim. "Last night was amazing. Can't stop thinking about it." My heart dropped. I froze, reading it over and over, hoping it was some sick misunderstanding. But the more I scrolled, the clearer it became. Dinner dates, secret hotel rooms, inside jokes, late-night confessions. It wasn't just one message, it was a relationship. He'd been seeing her for months, and while I was giving up everything to keep our marriage alive, he was already building something new with someone else. I closed the iPad gently and sat there for a long time, staring at nothing, feeling the pieces of my life crack silently beneath me. And then, I made a decision. I wouldn't confront him. Not yet. I would listen. I would watch. I would prepare. Because this time, I wasn't walking away broken. This time, I was going to take everything he took from me, and I was going to leave him empty. The next morning, I woke up before Mark, staring at the ceiling while he slept peacefully beside me. I watched his chest rise and fall, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel love. I felt calculation. I wasn't going to cry. I was going to play the long game. For the next few weeks, I became the perfect wife. I cooked his favorite meals, laughed at his dumb jokes, even wore the perfume he liked, the one I had stopped using because it made me feel like someone else. I played my part so flawlessly that he didn't suspect a thing. Every time he kissed me goodbye to hit the gym, I smiled and said, "Have fun." But I wasn't just waiting. I was collecting. I took photos of the messages, recorded voice memos when he was on speakerphone with her, and quietly compiled a timeline of every lie. I even discovered she wasn't just some random woman from the gym. She worked at a company Mark had pitched 2 months ago. They'd met on a business trip. Ironic, isn't it? The same kind of trip he'd begged me not to go on. I also started seeing a therapist, without telling him. I needed clarity. I needed someone to help me unravel how I'd allowed myself to be erased so quietly. My therapist, Dana, didn't tell me what to do. She just helped me see what I already knew. I didn't deserve this. I started journaling again, a habit I had long abandoned. Every entry became sharper, bolder. I was reclaiming my voice, one word at a time. Then one afternoon I came across something that changed everything. Mark had left his work bag on the couch. Inside was a folder, unmarked, just plain black. I wasn't snooping, I was cleaning. Or at least that's what I told myself. Inside were printed emails and forms, travel itineraries, a lease agreement for a 1-bedroom apartment downtown, signed by Mark. He was planning to leave me, and he hadn't said a word. In that moment, something inside me cracked open, but not with sadness, with purpose. He thought he was ahead of me. He thought he could replace me and walk away clean, like I was just a phase of his life that no longer served him. But he had underestimated me. I wasn't just going to walk away quietly while he started a new life built on betrayal. I was going to make sure that when he left, he'd do so with nothing, and I was going to do it on my terms. Over the next few days, I couldn't stop thinking about that lease agreement. Every time I looked at Mark, I saw the man who was planning his escape while still sleeping in our bed, pretending everything was fine. But I didn't confront him. Not yet. Instead, I got to work. I contacted a lawyer, quietly, one of Dana's referrals. She was calm, direct, and exactly what I needed. I gave her everything I had, screenshots, call logs, printed emails. She told me the more I documented, the better the outcome would be. We discussed spousal support, joint assets, and the fact that Mark had likely used marital funds to secure his secret apartment. I was shocked to learn how much that could work in my favor, if I played it right, and I planned to. At home, I continued to wear my mask. I laughed when he told me about his stressful meetings. I listened to his lies about needing to stay late at work. I even surprised him with dinner one night when he claimed to have an out-of-town meeting. He looked panicked when he walked through the door and saw me at the table. "You're home early," I smiled. Yeah, the meeting got canceled," he stammered. I nodded, pretending to believe him. But deep down, I saw the fear flicker in his eyes. He knew something was shifting, but he couldn't quite name it yet. A few days later, he left town for what he claimed was a week-long client conference, but I knew exactly where he was going. With her. I waited until I saw his flight departure confirmed in our shared email account. Then I put my plan into motion. First, I changed every password he might have access to, banking, insurance, even my Netflix account. I opened a new bank account in my name only and moved half of our savings there. My lawyer assured me I was within my rights. Then, I packed up his office, the one he always kept locked. Inside were files he probably assumed I'd never see, flirtatious letters, small gifts from her, even a vacation itinerary to Italy, with both of their names on the confirmation. It was like being stabbed twice, first with betrayal, then with arrogance. But I didn't cry. I took pictures, made copies, saved everything to a secure folder. And then I did the one thing I knew would hit him hardest. I called our financial advisor and requested a meeting. Alone. I laid everything on the table, told him what Mark had been doing, where the money had gone, and what I intended to do next. He didn't say much, but the sympathy in his eyes told me everything. "You're smart to protect yourself," he said. That night, I sat in our quiet home and realized something I hadn't felt in months. Power. Not rage, not revenge, just clarity. I was finally ahead. And when Mark returned, it would no longer be his home. It would be his reckoning. The day Mark returned, I felt nothing. No nerves, no fear, just calm. Like I had already walked through the fire and come out the other side. He walked through the front door with his usual swagger, suitcase in hand, sunglasses on top of his head. His phone was in his hand, and he barely looked up as he entered. "Hey," he said casually, dropping his keys on the counter. "You won't believe how exhausting that conference was." I nodded, watching him like I was seeing a stranger. "Really?" I said, arms folded. "Did she snore the whole time or just talk in her sleep?" His head snapped up, eyes wide. "What?" "You heard me." I walked toward him and tossed the printed itinerary on the counter. "Rome looked beautiful in the pictures. You should have sent a postcard." He stared at the paper like it might explode. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then, "It's not what you think." I laughed. That phrase, that classic, pitiful phrase. "It's exactly what I think, Mark. And exactly what you hoped I'd never find out." He moved closer. "I was going to tell you. I didn't know how." "Oh, don't flatter yourself," I snapped. "You weren't going to tell me anything. You were going to slowly disappear like a coward." He looked stunned, maybe even a little scared. I let that silence hang in the air before continuing. "I know about the apartment. I know about the money. I know about her." His face turned pale. "And I know about the lies," I said, my voice steady. "Every meeting, every late night, every fake smile. I know it all." "I made a mistake," he began. "No," I interrupted. "You made a series of choices, repeatedly, knowing exactly what you were doing. This isn't a mistake, it's a pattern. And I'm done playing the fool." He looked like he was about to argue again, but I raised a hand to stop him. "I've already met with a lawyer. Half the savings are in my name now. The rest will be handled legally. The house is in both our names, so you'll be staying somewhere else for the time being." "You can't kick me out," he said, his voice rising. "I'm not kicking you out, Mark. I'm asking you to leave. There's a difference." He shook his head in disbelief. "This is crazy. You're overreacting." "Overreacting?" I said, stepping closer. "You lied to me for months. You humiliated me. You planned your exit while still pretending to love me. I'm not overreacting, Mark. I'm finally reacting." He didn't have a response to that. For the first time in a long while, he was speechless. "I want you gone by tomorrow morning," I said, "and don't think about touching anything that isn't yours. My lawyer's ready to get the court involved if necessary." He opened his mouth like he wanted to protest, but then closed it. Maybe he finally understood that he had lost control of the narrative, that I wasn't the woman he could manipulate anymore. He turned and walked upstairs without another word, and as I stood in the living room, surrounded by the quiet hum of our once shared life, I felt something I hadn't felt in years: freedom. The next morning, the house was still. No footsteps, no clinking dishes, no Mark. I stood by the window, watching as he loaded the last of his things into his car. He didn't look up. He didn't wave goodbye. He just got in and drove away, the taillights disappearing down the street like a final punctuation mark. I closed the door and leaned against it, breathing out a heavy sigh. It was over. The pretending, the second-guessing, the sleepless nights wondering where he was, or worse, who he was with. I made myself coffee and sat down at the kitchen table. For the first time in a long while, it felt like my kitchen again. The light streamed in just the way I liked. I didn't need to tiptoe or avoid questions. I didn't have to plaster on a smile or rehearse my words to keep the peace. I was alone, and somehow I was okay. Later that day, I got a message from someone unexpected. Her name was Lauren, one of Mark's former co-workers. She wrote, "Hi, Emily. I hope this isn't intrusive, but I just wanted to say I heard what happened and I'm sorry. I know it's not my place, but I always admired how kind and composed you were, even when things around the office seemed off." I stared at the message for a long time. There was no hidden agenda, no gossip, just genuine empathy. We started chatting. Lauren told me how Mark had always kept his personal life a mystery, how he'd act irritated when someone mentioned his marriage. She admitted there were rumors about him and a few women at the firm, but nothing ever confirmed. The more we talked, the more a picture started forming in my mind. This wasn't just about me. This was a pattern with him. Manipulation, charm, deceit. And I had been just one of many. That should have made me angry. But oddly, it didn't. It made me feel stronger, like I had stepped out of a trap and could finally see how tightly it had been wrapped around me. That evening, I sat down and started making a list. Not a to-do list, not a legal checklist, a healing list, things I wanted to reclaim. Morning walks with no time limits, cooking just for me, reconnecting with my sister, laughing without guilt, trusting myself again. The more I wrote, the more I realized this wasn't the end. It was the beginning. I wasn't just picking up the pieces of my old life. I was building a new one, stronger, sharper, and completely mine. When I finally went to bed that night, I didn't cry. I didn't scroll through old photos or reread messages. I pulled the covers over me, turned off the lamp, and smiled into the darkness. Because I was still here, and for the first time in forever, that felt like enough. A week had passed since Mark left, and each day felt lighter than the one before. I had expected grief to suffocate me, to wake up every morning gasping under the weight of what I'd lost, but instead I felt air, space, peace. It wasn't that I didn't feel pain. I did. There were moments when silence felt deafening, when a familiar song or scent pulled memories out of nowhere. But those moments passed, and when they did, I noticed something incredible. I was healing. One morning, I finally opened the storage closet. It was filled with boxes, old photos, wedding gifts we never used, mementos from trips that now felt like fiction. I sat down in the middle of the room and began going through it all. I found a card Mark had given me on our 3rd anniversary. "You're my anchor, my peace in this storm." I stared at the handwriting for a long time. The irony was thick. I had been his anchor, but he had been my storm. I placed the card in a box labeled "Let Go." That became my ritual. Every item, every memory, sorted into either let go or keep. By the end of the day, only one small box remained. Inside it, my grandmother's locket, a book of poetry I had loved in college, a photo of me laughing with my best friend, and a tiny paper crane I had made during a long layover in Rome. That last one made me pause. I remembered sitting alone at that airport, thousands of miles from home, folding the delicate paper just to pass time. Back then, I had felt brave, untethered, capable of being anywhere and surviving it. And now, here I was again, folding my life into something new. That night, I lit a candle and sat by the window. Rain tapped gently against the glass, like a soft reminder that even storms can sound gentle when you're at peace. I thought about reaching out to old friends, but decided to give myself a little more time. I wasn't rushing this. For the first time in a long time, my timeline was mine alone. Then, out of nowhere, my phone buzzed. A message from Hannah, my college roommate. We hadn't spoken in years. "Hey, Emily, I don't know why, but you've been on my mind all day. I just wanted to check in and say hi. Hope you're okay." I couldn't help but smile. It felt like the universe was sending little nudges, that I was being seen even in my quietest, most private moments. I messaged her back, and before I knew it, we were making plans to catch up over coffee later that week. A small step, but a meaningful one. As I got ready for bed, I caught my reflection in the mirror. There were still shadows under my eyes, still faint traces of sadness around my mouth. But there was something else, too, a softness, a steadiness, like I was slowly becoming someone I had forgotten how to be. And in that moment, I realized something powerful. Mark had taken a lot from me, years, trust, hope, but he hadn't taken me. I was still here, still whole, still rising. The cafe was small, tucked between a bookstore and a flower shop, with the kind of mismatched chairs and faded wooden tables that made it feel like home. Emily arrived early. She always did that now, took time for herself, time to breathe, to look around and take in the world before engaging with it. She ordered chamomile tea and sat by the window, watching people hurry past in the cold. Each face told a story. Each step was someone's journey. When Hannah walked in, they both laughed immediately, surprised by how little had changed. Her warmth, her energy, it was like college again, except better, wiser. They talked for hours, about jobs, heartbreak, healing, about the time Emily had dyed her hair purple after a breakup, or how Hannah once got lost in Paris trying to find the Eiffel Tower, even though it was enormous. But then, Hannah leaned in with a softer voice. "I saw your post a few weeks ago. You looked different. Not sad. Just like someone who had been through fire and made it out." Emily nodded. I did. They sat in silence for a beat, the kind of silence that holds truth, not tension. "I'm proud of you," Hannah whispered. Emily blinked back tears. "I'm proud of me too." Later that night, at home, Emily opened her laptop. She started writing, not for work, not for anyone else, just for her. Her story, unfiltered, unpolished, real. She wrote about the day she found out, the lies, the betrayal, the nights she cried in the shower so no one would hear. But she also wrote about the peace that followed, the quiet rebirth, the moments she found herself again in small, ordinary things. She didn't know if she'd ever share it, but writing it felt like closure. She closed her laptop and looked around. The apartment still held echoes of what was, but it also whispered what could be. Fresh paint, a new plant on the windowsill, a different energy. Then came a knock. She wasn't expecting anyone. When she opened the door, a little girl from down the hall stood there holding a tray of cookies. "My mom said you might want some. She said you've been really strong." Emily smiled so wide it almost hurt. "Tell your mom thank you, and thank you." The girl skipped away, and Emily stood there for a moment. Cookies in hand, heart full. It wasn't just about surviving anymore, it was about thriving, about building something new, not from the ashes, but beside them. A place where pain existed, yes, but so did power. Where memories didn't haunt, they taught. She didn't need revenge, or answers, or apologies that would never come. She had something better, herself, whole, brave, free.